Welcome to my review of Makaimura for the Wonder Swan. And this is actually a completely exclusive Ghouls and Ghosts game in the Ghouls and Ghosts series. That it's very easy to miss this entry because most people haven't played the Wonder Swan or familiar with the portable system. But I believe it was a handheld. It might have only been released in Japan. I don't know a hell of a lot about the system. I do have it on my emulation setup, my emulation-based PC, which is what I use to play all emulated games, which are just older games like Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and probably about 100 systems. So, ranging all the way up to the Wii U. So I cover all that stuff on one machine pretty much. And all the modern stuff I play on the actual modern consoles, but yeah, so this is probably a very lesser known entry, and when I saw a video of this on the preview, because on the setup I have on the emulation PC, it shows a preview video of each game, or not each game. There's a lot of missing games that don't have any footage because there's so many games on there, but a lot of them have preview videos. So I saw a preview video of this, and I think I assumed that it was just a port of another Ghouls and Ghosts game because there's so many of them on console and arcade. So I think I didn't know it was a unique game with like unique level layouts and bosses, because most of them have that first stage that's a graveyard type of stage, so it all looks the same when you're seeing a preview video. It's easy to assume that it's just a port of one of the other Ghost and Goblin, Ghouls and Ghosts games. But this is actually a completely unique game in the series, and it was brought to my attention by one of my subscribers. I believe his name was Welkenbach. And he's actually given me a lot of information on games I didn't know about. So this was actually a really good find. And I have a full tutorial that details all my strategies for beating the game, all the exploits I found, things like that. So check that out if you're interested. But this game was quite good. And it's actually probably the easiest game in the series. I mean, it's still a little bit challenging, but if you're looking for an easier entry in the series, just to beat one of the games in the series, I would recommend starting with this, because I pretty much completed just about all the games in the series, aside from the PSP one. I think is the only one I haven't completed. And of course, there's ports of the arcade game for various computers and things like that that I haven't completed, but I have completed most of the main games in the series, aside from maybe the PSP game. Ghost and Goblins I completed for arcade, but I didn't complete the NES one, which is really a lot sloppier, and some of the computer ports and such. But yeah, this one I would say is the easiest in the series that I played, and it was a lot of fun. It's a very good game. It actually has swimming, climbing up ropes, things that you don't have in the other games, so it's pretty interesting. Now, the platforming is pretty shitty, but it's easy enough to adapt to. But you fall through the platforms if you're not pixel perfect on the center of the platform. It is kind of shitty with that, but there's not much platforming in the game, luckily. So it's easy enough to adjust to. But it is kind of anal with that. So the landing detection, as I call it, where you're landing on platforms, is kind of shitty in this game. But it's not a deal breaker for the game. It's something you can adjust to. The boss fights are pretty cool, but they're pretty simple once you learn them, but they're a lot of fun. The game does, of course, recycle bosses, as games always do in this series, where you will fight some of the bosses again. There's always a boss gauntlet, at some point in the game. Usually near the end. But this game does require you to go through it twice. The second time you have to use a different weapon to take on the later bosses to get the final boss to appear. Similar to all the other games in the series, pretty much. So, of course, I never liked that mechanic of the games, but, it doesn't take the game down. It just means you have to, play it again. So, you will have to do a second run through the game after beating it once to get the real ending. And to fight the true final boss. There's also multiple paths at one point. There's a point in the game where you can choose between two paths. But it doesn't matter too much what path you choose, because on your second loop, whichever path you beat is not going to be available anymore. So you're going to be forced to take the other path. So either way, to beat the game, when you go through both loops of the game, you'll have to do both paths either way. So you don't have an option as far as skipping a stage and never playing through it. You'll have to beat that on your second run. But yeah, on your second run through the game is when you will have to get a certain weapon out of one of the treasure chests. So it's a little cryptic with that, as is usual with these games. And I go into all the detail of that in the tutorial. I don't remember the exact specifics, but I covered it all in my tutorial. But yeah, the boss fights are cool, and they're all unique fights. Now, this is the weapon you're going to need for the second loop. This is the bracelet weapon. And there's kind of a very specific and irritating way that you have to get it with the treasure chest. So, luckily, my video is going to make that completely simple. You're not going to have to worry about figuring it out, because I completely break down how to get it. And it's not hard to do once you know what to do. If you don't know what to do, it can be a pain in the ass. It took me a little while to figure out what the fuck I had to do to get it. But you won't have to worry about that if you check the video. And of course, this bracelet can really destroy some of the bosses fast, because it does a lot of damage. It just doesn't have as much range. But in this version of the game, the bracelet weapon, as this is a pretty decent weapon. And Super Ghouls and Ghosts for Super Nintendo, it's a pretty shitty weapon. But in this, it's actually pretty good. It will destroy certain projectiles, but not these. But a lot of the bosses are simple once you get the patterns down. None of the bosses are too difficult. The game as a whole, like I said, is really not that difficult. It's very easy for a Ghouls and Ghosts series kind of game. So it's a good choice as a more relaxed playthrough. Or if it's your first in the series, it's a good one to start with. But yeah, I don't believe this was ever ported to any other consoles or machines, so I believe it's exclusive to the WonderSwan. And WonderSwan is very well emulated, so you can play it on an emulator like I did here. Now I find some really good positioning exploits to really destroy these bosses at the end fast. So the final bosses are quite easy with some of the strategies I use. And like I said, I go into detail on all that. And now for this second round, you finally get access to the final boss, which I believe I show the full final boss fight, as I like to do with some of these older game reviews. The final boss really isn't hard when you practice each section and know exactly what to expect. But it's a fun fight. It's multi-form. And the final boss is unique. It's not a recycled version of bosses you fought previously, so it's cool to, that it's not all recycled at the end. The game is not too bad with reusing bosses. It does a few times, but it's not. It doesn't do it too heavily. So yeah, basically, if you practice each section, it's really not hard. And for the very final form of the last boss, I found a really easy way to do it, which you'll see here. It makes it extremely easy. So that's all going to be detailed in my other video. Control is pretty good, but it's a little stiff, as is with the older games in this series. So, expect that. It plays more like an old arcade game, which is what it's based off of. But yeah, the final boss is cool because it's multiple forms, and it's pretty cool. It's a large sprite, pretty detailed. This game has unlimited continues as well, so. You will start back, I believe, on the last checkpoint you got to, so it's pretty forgiving. It's just a fun game to play through if you like these kind of games. And I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. I thought it was quite a good game. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.